The following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines. Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Hi, welcome back to another CSRM podcast. I'm really excited, as I am all the time, but especially today because I have not only a colleague and someone who's going to be with us for these next couple sessions, but a dear, good friend, someone who I've really appreciated. And without any further ado, Dan Stoffer, welcome to the program today.
Thanks, Greg. I'm excited to be a part. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and this has been an interesting ride for you that we'll get into. But today we're talking about local church, congregational-based sports, rec, and fitness. We say SRNF, sports, rec, and fitness ministries or missions in the local church. And you've been really kind of on the forefront of helping churches that may not have all the resources that some of the other churches have. They may be lacking in facilities. They may be lacking in finance or staff. They may be lacking in a lot of things, but kind of that smaller church or that underserved church, you define it. What's your passion and heart there?
Yeah. So I would say by definition, I think pre-pandemic, which is something we have something we have to say now for a lot of things in ministry and just in life in general, would be a congregation that averaged weekly attendance of less than 250. And so when I was hired with CSRM, David Waddell, our current executive director, this was his vision and kind of passed this on to me to be able to help serve churches that fit that category. Less than 250, probably don't have a necessarily full-time paid staff person, might not have all the facilities, just like you said. And again, pre-pandemic, we're not running over 250 people on a weekly basis.
And what you found is that kind of demographic within the local church world, they have some particular strengths and particular needs, and that's what you're addressing. Well, that's where we're going, folks. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But Dan, just bring us kind of up to date with you and kind of your journey. There'll be some folks that don't know you that may have been watching or listening to these podcasts. And I'll get the ball rolling, and I'm going to jump to where we are today, but then you can kind of fill in the gap. And that is that Dan has actually been hired by the CSRM board to become the next executive director. And he's serving in a dual position with our current executive director, David Waddell, until next September. And that the two of them, Dan and Dave, are working together. And Dan has been with us for the last year or two on our CSRM staff. But congratulations on that. We are so excited about that.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah. I'm excited about the future. I really am.
Yeah. But how did you get there?
Yeah.
When did you feel a call to ministry, and have you been involved on church staffs, and how have you done the sports rec fitness thing? And you can brag a little bit. You were a college athlete, et cetera, et cetera. So you have an athletic background, but just bring us up to date.
Yeah. Well, my journey, like I'm sure most of your listeners here, is an interesting journey in that I went to college to play football, just like you said, Greg, and also I was going to be a history teacher and was doing some ministry on campus, but didn't really have any idea what I was doing. In fact, kind of what I felt as a call into ministry was um, my junior year, the very first practice of training camp. I tore some ligaments in my ankle
Mm.
and missed a big part of the season. And so I remember kind of questioning, like, okay, God, this is a big year. It's my junior year. You know, I had a chance to have some playing time that was taken away almost on our very first day of practice, and
Wow.
you know those things happen. And so I felt a call to start a Bible study, and so me and a few other people, and this was a Christian school. But like a lot of Christian schools, there were still some guys on the team that were not Christ followers, and I really didn't know anything about ministry. Again, it wasn't something I necessarily felt a call to go and do. But we started a Bible study, and we saw people won to Christ. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was probably just imitating what I saw people doing it in my home church. And so we would have a weekly Bible study in some small groups. We saw a handful of people come to Christ, and we just kind of kept that going. Fast forward to the summer before my senior year, and I was all set to kind of wrap up my senior year with student teaching and becoming a high school history teacher was kind of my focus, and coach football, obviously, and just felt during that summer a call into ministry. And so I knew about a local university in my hometown that offered sports ministry as a major. I found out that they offered it at the graduate level, which is where I met you. And so I played my senior year of college, had a good season, graduated with a degree in history, went right into graduate school at that university. I was also hired to be a graduate assistant football coach, which was very interesting, and learned a lot. And kind of cool because I was pretty much the same age as a lot of players. In fact, some were even older than I was, those fifth year seniors, but learned a lot in the classroom, on the field, coaching football, and then got a great internship at a local church, actually my home church, that had a sports ministry that I kind of dabbled in high school somewhat, you know, when I wasn't playing different sports for school, sports that I didn't have time to play. I played in the local church's sports ministry, and had a great internship there, doing some sports ministry, doing some youth ministry, like a lot of people, wearing several different hats, learning a lot. Eventually, that church hired me full time as a sports minister and youth minister. And you know, God just has kind of carried me into a few different roles in ministry, spiritual formation. I've pastored some churches. I'm currently a church planter, and what's kind of neat is I've done sports ministry at that level in a church. I've been that staff person, but every church I've been a part of has had either a formal or informal sports ministry. And so we've had volunteers, we've had paid staff people who kind of, along with some other duties, have overseen sports ministry. And so that's kind of my entry point into ministry. I've been doing this since 2002, was ordained in 2004, and wouldn't trade it for anything. Along with that, too, I just want to encourage some of our listeners here. Even when I wasn't being paid to do sports ministry for a church, I tried to, as a youth minister, build bridges to the local schools by coaching football, and which is a fantastic way to build that bridge to get people into your church. Because if you're able to coach football at a local school, you become a staff member, and your interactions with students is just unlimited. And there's opportunities there to build relationships. Obviously, you have to be careful with the separation of church and state, but there are things that we can do for the Lord and serve our community. And so that's kind of been my journey with that.
And a journey it's been. And obviously, you survived your master's degree program, and uh, you just take a step back now. And do you see God's orchestrating in your life? And I want to also have you talk a little bit about this church plant,
Yeah.
because as I understand it, if I understand it correctly, you're also trying to implement the sports rec and fitness even as part of that, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, so I would see God's hand in my life. Obviously, grew up playing all different kinds of sports. Just enjoyed that. I'm one of five boys, and so that was just kind of our journey, right? Little backyard battles and things like that, and led into little league and middle school and high school sports. And then I was blessed enough by God to be able to play at the next level too. Um, but I think it was my love for sport. Like I remember I had a paper out, and I remembered that every time I got those papers, the first thing that I would do was turn to the sports section and kind of see how the Cleveland Indians did, or how the Browns were doing, or how the Cleveland Cavaliers were doing, and reading. So I've always had an interest in sport, both watching, playing, coaching, and then you know, as I already kind of shared, I don't think had I not been injured, which is never fun, right? Especially when you are that upperclassman and you just don't know what the future holds. And you start talking about ligaments and things like that. You just don't know what that means for your future. And anytime you're injured, somebody else behind you has that opportunity to kind of shine. And so had I not had that happen and kind of had that conversation with God, okay, why am I here? And him kind of highlighting ministry, I don't know if I ever would have gone into ministry. I was a pretty shy guy. I tried to lead by my example, but not necessarily by anything I would say. Public speaking was never anything that I was super excited about. But God has used that opportunity way back when in college to kind of open doors. And Greg, I got to tell you, you probably understand this too. I learned more about ministry by coaching than really anything else. I mean, the classroom was great for theology. You did a great job preparing me for that. But the best teacher in my experience has been opportunities to learn how to influence people. And as a coach, I think there's a lot of things that translate into ministry and leading people. As far as a church plant, this is something brand new for me. We were all set to go with a launch team back in February to plant a church and have our grand opening in September. And as you all know, the pandemic happened, and so we decided to plant online first. And so we did that on April 12th of this year. And in fact, yesterday, so for us, that's October 25th, we had our very first in-person gathering. So church planting looks a lot more like steps that are manageable. Right now, we planted online with online services. We've had online small groups that have grown from 3 to 6. We had our first in-person meeting. We're going to try that once a month through the end of the year, just kind of see where God takes it, see how it grows. We had 61 people for the first time in the middle of a pandemic. Our sending church is going to try to encourage 80 more people to come with us for our next gathering. And one of our core values for our church as we built this, and you kind of hinted at this, is health. We just want people to be healthy, body, mind, and spirit. You know, we are very complex beings as God has created us, and we want sport, rec, and fitness to be a part of that. And so I've had a handful of conversations, some very promising conversations with people who have a strong interest in this. And we're hoping that at the very least that we'll have a small group launched sometime early next year with some sort of fitness emphasis around that. And then hopefully that will develop into a more formal sports ministry. But we want that to be the foundation for this new church plant. And the church plant is called Multiply Christian Church. You can check us out at multiply614.com.
And I'm sure that if you are watching this, those data points will come up, information points will come up on the screen. And if you are listening in onto this, on both of these venues, you probably realize we're still not in our studios due to the COVID time. And so you may hear some background, or you may not see something as clear as normal. But we're all adapting to this COVID time. And if you can't see it's on the screen, just get into our website, and it's just as simple as csrm.org, and you can grab hold of it and find out some of these pieces of information that Dan's sharing. We I want to take you just a little bit deeper on a couple things, Dan, and that is that, well, first part give some information to some of our listeners that they may not know that every CSRM staff person is maybe duly employed. Uh, this was part of the strategy of CSRM because we never wanted to become relics that, well, 27 years ago we did it this way. And so the idea is that each one of our staff members is intimately involved in some way with another ministry, and hopefully that's even a vocational paid kind of position. And so you are doing this CSRM role in a part-time capacity, as I have and others have. And so we need to help people understand that. But there's a strength in that because we are right on the cutting edge. We're doing this every day. And it's not something that we refer to historically, uh, exclusively historically. We do refer historically to some things. And then to go a little more into the depth of what you're talking about and help people understand your background, you talked about that you grew up in a church that had
Yes.
a sports group, and it was one of the very first churches when we moved from the terminology sports ministry to sports outreach.
Yes.
And our good friend and former board member Jim Corella was was the man who really helped even myself and others think this can't just be ministry to our own people. It has to be sports outreach to other people. And so I think that church that you grew up in has even played a role in the overall sports outreach community in that regard. And so you grew up with that, and then the churches that you've served with as a pastor,
Yeah.
you have helped them grow their sports outreach, conceptualize it. But even in your last church, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars you spent, but you helped them envision a holistic way of doing that. Uh, and it's got a cafe, and it's got sports, and it's got some different things. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on these things, but I want people to know that you've seen this at different levels
Yes.
from different perspectives, and that you come from us rather than to us. Other thoughts you have about those things that help shape you?
Yeah, I'm very humbled to not be that old. I have to put that in front of that now because I'm 41, right? So to not be that old, but yeah, God has just blessed me. I grew up in a large church. That church has been a mega church for as long as I can remember, and even if the numbers dip below kind of that status of 2000, which is kind of that threshold for mega churches. The facility and kind of the way that church operated has always been that way. And then so I've worked for churches as large as 2,000. I've worked for churches that are medium sized, so kind of that 5 to 600 range. I'm starting over right now with a church plant from the ground up, and so I think there's that vast experience to be hands on, which helps because just like you said, working with CSRM, which has been a major blessing, but also being in the church world, I've been privileged to be able to see different size churches and how they operate, and to kind of help cast that vision to make sure that we're a church that has sports, recreation, and fitness as a major part of our outreach strategy. The last church I served at, you may mention that, yeah, we were part of a building project. And what really sparked that, and that building project cost $2.3 million. So this
Okay.
was quite the building project. But what really sparked a big part of that was the growth in our sports area, our sports outreach. And so I was the lead pastor of that church, and we had a fantastic staff person who's overseeing our sports outreach. We would reach hundreds of children, especially in our basketball leagues. And we've had families really, I mean, you talk about basketball season, from that October, November time through early spring, pretty much every night of the week, they were inside of our building. And so that certainly helped our growth in our worship services. And so we needed more space. And like you mentioned, the cafe component, the vision behind that was for people to be able to, while their kids were playing basketball, for parents to be able to sit down at the cafe, have a meal, fellowship. I often noticed when I would volunteer as a coach, because my kids played in that league too, that kids would come in with fast food bags, right? Because their parents were busy and they were coming from school to practice to games, which was fine. But there were two problems. There was no place to eat anything in that facility, or at least not well and comfortable. And two, it wasn't the most healthy option. And so the vision was, could we provide something with healthy options for kids, for coaches, and for families just to hang out, to see our building as like a community center was kind of that vision behind that. So again, God's got an interesting sense of humor that he has allowed me to see different things, experience different things, and even lead in some different ways. And I'm very thankful for that.
Well, we're coming down to the end of this segment. We'll come back, but I just want to summarize there, and I want to then, when we start next time, we can start here about this holistic health element. And I just want people to hear that not only is this something that can be of great service to families and kids, as Dan just outlined for us, but if you plan it right, it can also be a financial support to your own ministry. And we'll talk about that and more. And we're going to continue even plumbing the depths a little bit more of that underserved, underutilized, smaller church. And we want to help folks with a vision to know that just because today they may be under 250 people or they don't have a sports facility, that doesn't mean that God can't do some great things there. So Dan, thanks for being here. And for you that have been listening or watching, come back next time. We're going to keep going with Dan on this topic about how to help churches that may not have all the resources or all the pluses of the world. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it.
CSRM's podcasts are a resource provided by the Association of Church, Sports, and Recreation Ministries and its production house, Overwhelming Victory Flicks. This episode was produced by Dr. Greg Linville and edited by Andrew Fouts. For more information about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.